Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul, 30 Minutes for God.
A podcast sponsored by Piedmont Road Church of Christ and Ministry League.
We're here to discuss Bible topics just as if we were asking Jesus himself. I am Paul Sperlin.
And I am Les Sandifer, and we hope you will enjoy our relaxed Bible-based discussions.
Thank you for joining us as we think about and talk about all those things we'd ask Jesus over a cup of coffee.
Whew, there it is.
There it is.
That intro, very special.
Like it.
I do too. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Welcome to the show, Les, and all of our listening audience. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Les and Paul Show, the 30 Minutes for God, the coffee convo.
And I actually have
a coffee
today.
And a cup.
It's very, very nice.
It is.
Yeah.
And while he's drinking that coffee, let's pay some bills here. Thanks to Piedmont Road for sponsoring this good show, and Ministry League for being a part of that as well. That is lifeinchrist.com and ministryleague.com. And if you want to send us a note of encouragement or questions, or maybe something you'd like to hear us talk about on this show, send it to coffeeconvo@lifeinchrist.com. And we will respond to you once you send that email to us.
Have we gotten any?
Yeah, we got a few.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's always nice.
That's good stuff. Good to talk.
It is good to talk.
Good. Here's the question, though. You listen right now. I have this question. Do we need to do more social media?
Yes.
Do we need a Facebook page? Do we need an Instagram? We could put a lot of, things like where we're at, because we have a lot of things going up this summer. We'll be going to a lot of places, doing a lot of things. And,
yeah.
But is it need to be something where people can interact with us during the week, maybe?
Is this a question for me or the listening audience?
I guess everybody, because the listening audience isn't going to say anything to us right now. But
it's a fair point.
But if they do right now,
if they do, somebody else is involved in this process.
That's right. Ooh, where'd that voice come from?
Yeah, and who is that voice?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah. Well,
I guess that was yes.
I guess we
can move on to the next thing.
I think we solved that.
We did. We have our Bibles open. The Lord is invited. We have the coffee and or other drinks of caffeine nature. And so
I feel confident that we are going to finish up this section in Romans 12 today.
I concur with your assessment.
Which is where we find ourselves at this moment in time.
That is correct. And that is in Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 18. Is where we left off last week.
Yes, that is correct. Opening another document so I can remind myself of other things. But
right.
Yeah, so we were kind of in the verse, 16, 17 range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Picking up in 18 where Paul tells this church, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never... Oh, did you hear that? Not beloved. I said beloved.
You did say beloved.
Whew. I must fail the Church of Christ test.
Beloved. Separate and apart.
Separate and apart. Yeah.
Well,
for these and all other blessings. I was trying to think of the phrases. Anyway, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.
You just going to go and read it all?
Yeah, I can finish it out. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Yeah. So again,
positive thinking, positive writing.
Yeah, a lot to digest in those verses.
You're turning the corner. You're turning the coin on life and how we treat people and how we talk to people and how we respond to life,
Yeah, it's very difficult.
So far as it depends on you.
Yeah, and in this world we live in, it is very difficult to apply the principles in this section, particularly the ones towards the end where you're flipping the script, if you will, on good and evil.
Right.
Because it is very much a a thing, I suppose, to want to get back or to want somebody else to pay for the thing they've done to you.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
I get it. It is interesting. He did start, because this section of Scripture started in verse 9 and it ends here in verse 21. It's interesting that he talks about dealing with good versus bad from the beginning of this passage to the end.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from beginning to end, he's like, wait a minute, don't forget about this. And the reason why he does that is because he knows we're going to face bad stuff. We're going to face tribulations. We're going to face, verse 12 talks about be patient tribulations. He's saying be careful, be patient, so far as it depends on you, meaning you get to dictate how this is going to go.
Right.
You know, it's like an attitude.
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to be tomorrow? Tomorrow is Monday. How will we be when we get up out of that bed, take a shower, do your stuff, get ready to go to work? You know, what kind of day are you going to have? Well, you get to decide on that.
Yes.
Like happiness is not something you just pick up and hope for the best. You choose happiness or you choose sadness.
It is a struggle sometimes.
It is. It's Monday.
And it's a struggle. It's a struggle sometimes with little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about this a lot at home because there's just little things you have to deal with in life. But when you look at what's going on around you and the struggles that other people have, it's maybe
They become smaller.
They become much smaller.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's part of the work of Satan is that it creeps back in. At least for me, it does.
Yeah.
So I can have that moment where I have pure clarity that this thing that I'm dealing with, which is insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that weighs on me.
Right.
I can have that clarity because I know somebody else is hurt and they've lost a child or they've had a diagnosis of something in their life or, you know, they're in a much worse financial position. But it's an hour later, half a day later, a day later, I'm still back to the other things kind of creeping in. And I think that's, you know, part of the work of what Satan does in our life, try to keep us off track.
Yeah, and I feel kind of small when I start accounting how terrible my life is, you know, or what I deal with, and I look around like, but I don't have to deal with that.
Right.
You know, and it's like, and I think that kind of goes back to the whole, you know, and I just lost it, that it depends on you.
Yeah. It's
like you need to continue to assess and reassess what's happening in your life right now because there's somebody dealing with something much worse, and it allows you to think, instead of me feeling sorry for myself, maybe I should do something to help that person.
So, you know? And it's, you know, we've had this conversation, but the verse we kind of started with, we're basically saying, as much as it's within your control, live peaceably with all men. I always think back in and of myself when I read that verse and other verses where we talk about peace, that ultimately we have to understand that in this world, there's always going to be conflict that we're dealing with.
Right.
We need to minimize that conflict in the church at all costs.
Right.
It's not going to go away, but that's the place where we have the best chance of not having it happen. But I think this verse actually speaks beyond that, right? Of course.
It really does.
And out to the world. But understanding that as Christians, that peace starts with your relationship with Jesus, because that's where your peace comes from.
That's true.
Your peace doesn't come from the absence of conflict with people in the world, because that will always be there.
That's true.
Especially if you're living your life the way you should, people are always going to be poking at it.
Yeah.
Satan's always going to be working on something to try to, but your peace is an inner peace that comes from, I love Jesus, Jesus takes care of me. The rest of it's in perspective.
And why do we take on more than we really need to? That's what this comes down to. We take on more stuff than God wants us to do.
It's a great question.
So you got worry and vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
We worry every day of our life, but it is not ours to worry about. God is to take care of that.
Yeah.
And I do. We do a lot of things that the Lord doesn't mind handling for us.
And there's a distinction to be made between the worry that we do a lot of and the things where we are actively concerned about something but engaged in a process to handle or work on. It's a different thing. It's a different thing because Jesus told us not to worry about, the little things, the lilies of the field, if you will. I mean, those are the things where God's going to take care of the things around you. He's going to take care of you. But we have an ultimate responsibility to be engaged in that process of helping ourselves.
For sure.
If that's a
No,
good
it
way
does.
to put it.
It does because yeah, especially the worry thing because we worry about things we can't control. But he also leads into that. And I threw the worry in there. That's not in the passage, but it's the worry part, but it's also the vengeance part because we want justice.
Yep.
You're not going to get it here.
Well,
Okay.
and those two things kind of go hand in hand in terms of how we deal with those things. Because we can be fixated on, as you said, the vengeance part. Something's happened to us. We're fixated on, I want something to happen to them, which is a completely foreign point of view to how Jesus wants us to live.
Exactly. I'm about to say the very same
Interacting with other people. But it is a thing, right?
That's not what he wants us to do.
But we still think about it.
It kind of comes into the category of, well, I don't mean it to be this way, but just to let things go.
No.
Especially, I know I said that. I'm like, oh, he's gonna think this. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is stuff that bugs us. Before we got on, I was sharing something with Les about something that happened this week, and I've got to deal with it. I've got to understand. I've got to let that go because I've got to move on because I got more things to do that are productive, spiritually speaking. Well, any way speaking, that I can do without having to worry about something. Back to the worry. Okay.
Right.
So it kind of all does kind of work hand in hand.
It's like
let the Lord handle it and let him deal with it. Let's just move on. Not with the topic, but let's just move on with, the thing.
Well, and we've had the conversation about the phrase "let it go."
Yeah.
And for me, it comes from a movie reference, but in the movie, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the concept that that what we're talking about. But as a Christian, we really should be in the business of putting away those things that we really can't have that much control over.
Yeah, right.
Or the things that in the moment irritate. Is that the right word? It's very much. We've talked about it. We talked about it in our Bible class this morning. Everybody has something different they face.
Right.
This is one of my really significant struggles is those flashes of irritation about things that you probably shouldn't be irritated about to start with. But even if there's some measure of, hey, I kind of get why you are, move on.
Yeah.
And just let it go.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And it's a great phrase for that.
And we all have it. We've all got that thing that
We've
bugs
all
us.
got it.
I mean, we do. No one's free from being able to deal with that. So that's one of the things he says. But what God does say, he says, I will repay, says the Lord. God will take care of it. So why are we worrying about and holding on to something that we have no control over? And it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about.
What do you think that means? What is God telling us there?
He's telling us, and I mentioned this in our last show, I believe, that one day justice will be served.
Okay.
But that's not going to happen here. This is life.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I was kind of trying to get to, is that we also shouldn't live in this mindset that the person that's wronged us is going to be harmed in this life in some way as a repayment
Right.
for that thing.
That's not a positive way of thinking and a godly way of thinking, to be honest.
Yeah, no, ultimately, God would have us to, as the rest of the verses say, do something for that person in a positive way that can overcome
It's true.
whatever the issues are that.
Because it says to the contrary, just continue with it.
Yep.
If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink.
How do we do it?
What do we do? There's hold on. What am I thinking? There's a passage. I guess it's Sermon on the Mount. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. It is. When you get into the second mile service, surrounding that passage, it talks about if someone takes your takes your coat or whatever, you give them your belt or whatever. I mean, that's not what it says. But
did we talk about that idea of second mile service in here? Was it just with the kids?
It was class. It was class. The teenagers. Yeah, we taught teenagers for that.
Because, I mean, this really is a good spot.
It goes hand in hand with it.
Because it does. It ties in very nicely with it. And the idea that when Jesus said, go the second mile, there's a backstory to that about how the Romans legally had the right to tell you to carry something of theirs for a mile.
Right.
Jesus was really kind of making the point there that you weren't doing the first mile just because you wanted to do the first mile.
Right.
And we sometimes in this life go the extra mile, like we went the first mile of our own accord, and now we're just stretching ourselves. It's a little bit different because Jesus is saying, even when you're compelled to do something in a way that's not comfortable to you,
Right.
go ahead and continue to do it to show them the goodness that comes from God, that you will continue to do it.
So there's a difference in being compelled to do something and being committed to do something.
Yes.
And that's the 2 miles.
Yes.
The first mile, you're compelled to do this because the law tells you have to.
Great way to put it.
The last part is the commitment.
Yep.
It's what you're going to do in your heart. And I think what that does is it takes that Roman soldier and that chain that was from him to you as a person. You can only go so far. Okay, the distance had a lot to do with the whole law. And what's neat is it's like carry that and just let's say, okay, where are we going to go now? Let's keep going. You're done with you? Okay, now it's my time.
Yeah.
Let's do something for the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus almost has a little smile, cracked smile, looking over the situation if he sees, you thought that was good, you just wait to see what my people are going to do now.
And I feel like some of this verse is wrapped up in the idea of getting outside of where we're comfortable.
Yeah.
Because it is not conceptually thinking beyond the idea of literally handing somebody that you're at odds with food.
Right. Yeah.
But the bigger context of doing something for them where they have need, even though you know this is not somebody that you G-haul with, if you will.
And we're not talking about food.
Right.
I mean, it says food. That's not what we're talking about. What he's saying is do something for someone. You normally wouldn't do something for someone.
Yes.
And that's why what happens when that happens? Well, you're heaping burning coals on their head. Not literally, but you're getting on their nerves to the point where, like, why are you doing good things?
Right.
That's what Jesus wants us to do.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here right now. And that brings into the last verse completely with that.
And in theory, that heaping of the coals brings on a shame to them.
Right.
For having been the way they were in the first place.
Shrug your shoulders, head down. It's like, oh, he did this. So now
Yeah, I was wanting him to get all bowed up and fight back, and I was
but here he is.
trying to punch his buttons, and he's bringing me a loaf of bread.
And you know those people. You got those people in your life. They know what buttons to push because they know you well enough to know where to push them.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
I have
dude,
buttons.
don't do that. Don't do that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you knew that. That's messed up.
And then, of course, the last verse, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Don't be overcome by evil. Don't let the devil win.
Don't let the devil win.
Don't let the devil win. Don't let the devil win, and don't let the devil in.
And so that takes us through we've talked about this for several.
But overcome the evil with good.
Overcome the evil with good.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this whole section for quite some time.
A month. It seems like a few shows, but it's good.
Yeah, it actually is,
and it's good that we broke it down like this, though.
Yes, I agree.
When do you sit down and just get to do this?
No, not very often, and it's a great section of Scripture. Mm-hmm. For those of you listening, and I don't think we really ever said this in the lead up to why we're in Romans 12, but. Like much we do in our Bible study, this came up as a conversation Paul and I were having leading into one of the shows.
Yeah,
where we were talking about something else in a lesson series we were doing.
Right.
And Paul goes, it reminds me of Romans 12. I'm not sure if you said specifically 9 to 21, but you said
starting verse 9.
This section,
yeah,
and it became a whole theme for several weeks of podcast because it's a perfect thing to jump in there and talk about.
Well, not to rehash everything we talked about already, but we talked about where do you start studies, have a Bible study, anywhere really.
Right.
But this kind of came from the new level of love. So if you just finished this and you're listening, go back to John 13, starting in verse 33, and just go through chapter 14 and just talk about that love that Jesus wants us to have for each other, but also chapter 14 shows what kind of love Jesus has for us by going away and preparing a home for us.
Yeah, and then all
the
the things he gives us in 14, 15, and 16, preparing them and thus us
right
for the time where he wouldn't be here, and all the things that are going to go with it, sending a helper,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Oh,
all,
man.
all of that sort of thing. And then the subject matter we covered weeks ago in 1 John chapter 3,
Mm-hmm.
where we talk about from the beginning, love one another, and the relationship of what that love means,
Right.
where it talks about Cain and Abel and
Hmm.
our relationship to the world,
Right.
which led us naturally into this place where we
Yep.
talked about Romans chapter
12.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking
No,
down. I was
you're
looking down at the notes, and I saw Hebrews 10 on the page,
That was the one before that.
and that was the one before it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, Romans 12,
What was
Romans
it
10.
again?
Which Romans is it?" Romans is a great study.
It is.
Yeah, I've done it a couple of times with somebody else teaching. And I remember one time one of our elders, Roger Winslet, did a study on the Book of Romans. I believe it was Roger.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, so pretty good stuff there. And really, I mean that kind of gives us a wrap up to this whole subject matter of love and the brotherhood that we've been on. I mean, not
Right.
that you ever step away from that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a lot of it's a big, huge piece of the puzzle
Right.
for what it means to be a Christian. But it gives us a chance to kind of start to move on down the road. Like we've got one of our topics on here is a place where nobodies or somebodies,
Mm-hmm. Like next week.
like next week. So setting us up for now that we've really got this idea of how we're supposed to interact with one another, we can expand that to
Right.
understanding a little bit more about what we're gonna do with it.
And that will be next week, and that is a place where nobodies are somebodies. And of course, we're talking about the Lord's church, and we continue the dream of Jesus that way because everybody has an address in the mansion,
Or they have their own mansion,
or they have their own room in the mansion.
their own room in the mansion.
Yeah,
But
Big
Jesus
mansion.
said he's going to build a mansion. Oh, you're thinking it's one big mansion. We're all living in the same.
I think so.
Okay.
We live in the rooms in the mansion.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, this sounds like a good way.
We're gonna find out.
To end this podcast. We can talk about the mansion. I've never thought of it that way.
Really?
No, I've always thought
That's
of
why
that
I hate-
first section of John
Oh.
chapter 14 as being. So I did some math one time about heaven,
Okay.
and we should not do what I'm fixing to say, but I'm going to
Okay.
bring it up anyway.
Here we go.
If you take some of the literal information given to you in the book of Revelation about heaven, and you extrapolate that to a worldly view.
Okay.
I once did some math. I won't remember what it was, but if you take a vertical view, meaning you take a plot of land
Sure.
that's the size of what it describes, and then you go vertical with it. I think it gives it.
Oh,
I think
that's
it gives it 3D measurements.
Okay. Yeah.
In the book of Revelation, if you put I think I did 1,000 square foot room,
Okay.
which is a small apartment.
Yeah.
The number of apartments that would fit in that was enormous.
Okay. I'm sure.
And I don't even remember why I did that, but I just thought it was interesting to make the analogy that way. I've never thought of it. I've always thought of it as individual, like we all go to our own house in heaven, right? We all have our own mansion in heaven.
That's interesting.
But it sure makes more sense to think of it
Yeah, it's one house.
as one.
It's a family.
It's a huge, yeah,
Where does the family live?
that's right.
In the house.
And then where do you go when you're going to throw your crown at the feet of God and sing praises to Him all the time? You're all there in the same house.
Yeah, the den.
You're already there.
The den, the kitchen, wherever you feel like doing it.
That's right. It's a big den
It's a big den.
with a big fireplace.
It's awesome.
This is terrible.
This is why I'm not a big fan of the ESV's version of that passage.
What
Because
is-
it talks about rooms. I'm preparing for you many rooms.
Oh, is that what it says?
And that's true. He is preparing many rooms, but I think those rooms are in the mansion, which
Okay.
KJV and I think it's New King James talks about mansions. And of course we sing about it if you remember that song book,
Oh, yes.
number 350.
I've got a
Mansions over
mansion
hilltops. Yeah.
just over the hilltop
Just over the hilltops.
in that bright land.
So
where,
since that song says that, then it just is.
well, that's right. Yeah, there are some folks that believe if it's in the songbook.
It is.
It's all
I
good.
don't want to get you started, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. We can do a whole podcast on
No, we can't.
songs we shouldn't sing.
We
can.
could. I
We
guess
can-
we could.
We can just pull out 3 or 4 and go. Don't ever sing this
That's
again.
true.
Don't ever sing
Please
this
don't.
again.
Please don't.
Just put a big black
It's funny.
highlighter, Sharpie in your book and just
Yeah.
X that song out. I've actually seen songbooks that do that.
Too. It's a
Where they-
stamp.
Yeah,
So sad.
it is. But I mean, sometimes it's you have to remind people, hey,
Yeah,
the words matter.
they do.
We go to the Bible for teaching. We go to men, and the men fail us.
That's true.
That's what happens sometimes.
Unfortunate.
Some commentaries are great up to a point,
Yep,
but they're not all perfect.
they aren't.
So you have to. You even said it in class this morning. I mean, you specifically said in class, our text is the Bible
I did.
because that's the truth.
It is.
That's not going to fail you.
It's not.
A man may fail you in his
Mm-hmm.
understanding of that text.
I just like finishing your sentences.
God is not going to fail.
He's not.
He's not.
He's not.
That's all.
Why? Well, it goes back to the vices. I really think that was probably the biggest point we probably made of points this morning in class.
Yeah.
Is opinions, because this is a whole other show, but opinions are built because man doesn't want to do something. Or their toes are stepped on by Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if that's happening, don't you need to make a change?
Right.
But the world, they don't want to make a change.
Mm-mm.
They liked what they like. But where are they going to be when this world's over? What kind of
you're right.
eternal destiny will they have
Yeah,
if you don't do what God asks us to do?
It is kind of a whole separate podcast because
I know.
there's all sorts of things you can bring
Look
up
what I did.
at this point.
I know.
Maybe we should talk about that next.
Ooh, I like it.
All right. That's what we got. That's what we're doing next.
Maybe so. Probably so. I like it. Thank you for joining Les and I here for this show. Coffee Conversations with Les and Paul. 30 minutes for God. Thank you to Piedmont Road and Ministry League for hosting or allowing us to host this and being our sponsors for this good show. Thank you all for visiting with us. We really look forward to that next time we're with you over that next cup of coffee.